All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a stack of notes and writings in front of us today, and we're diving into something really intriguing. It's about the sometimes unexpected and frankly kind of dramatic power of prayer, especially in places you might think are, well, incredibly challenging.
Exactly. And the material we're looking at, it doesn't frame prayer as just, a quiet afterthought or only for personal growth.
Right.
It's depicted as this potent, dynamic force directly connected to real, tangible breakthroughs in ministry settings.
Yeah, it's put forward right from the start, almost like the main idea. One of the writings quotes someone named Jacob, who basically suggests that success in these high-stakes kinds of ministry is just, well, it's inextricably linked to believing in and practicing prayer.
It's presented as the absolute foundation.
Yeah.
The thing everything else gets built on, not just some optional extra you add later.
Okay, let's unpack this then. One of the first scenes described in the notes is just, wow, captivating. You have to picture this. A large, very secret baptism, like 300 believers in a really challenging Muslim region, and it's all happening with this incredible precision, almost like a military operation.
Yeah, the description gives this sense of real intensity. They arrive, pray, immerse hundreds, have a brief worship time, pray again, and then disperse.
Yeah.
All in less than an hour.
Incredible, because, discovery would mean serious risks for everyone.
Absolutely.
And right in the middle of this intense, perfectly planned event, the narrator notices something odd. A woman, Hadhi, standing a bit apart from the main group, under a tree.
Just standing there.
Yeah, just standing, smiling like she's anticipating something great, but not actually doing anything in the moment, not helping, not getting ready.
Really, just watching.
So the narrator's curiosity is definitely stirred up, because after the whole thing finishes, everyone else leaves, but she's still there.
It's still under the tree.
So they finally ask someone, who is that woman over there?
And the answer is one of those moments that just clicks everything into place. The source says the response was, without her, none of this would have ever happened. She is Hadhi, the mother of the movement.
Wow.
This is more than a disciple-making movement. It is a prayer movement. And it all started a few years ago in her home when people began praying for us.
So, okay, this huge, risky, logistically complex event, it all traces back to this woman. And the prayer that started in her home, that's quite a connection.
It totally shifts how you see that whole event, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The material points directly to prayer as the essential catalyst, the hidden engine.
Okay, so that's the outcome. But how does a prayer movement like that even start? The notes take us back 5 years earlier. We meet Pastor Girani.
Right, Girani and his church. About 250 people in a big city dealing with some serious issues. Unemployment, poverty, violence. The usual stuff in tough urban areas.
Girani sounds like a character, though. The notes mention he has a good sense of humor.
Which you'd probably need doing ministry there.
Definitely. And his other remarkable asset, besides the humor, his wife, Hadhi, the writing calls her treasured.
Known for praying and seeing wonderful things happen.
Yeah, apparently their home was already this known hub for prayer. People gathered there specifically for that. It says she'd convinced Girani years before that prayer was really the secret sauce, especially for reaching the people God was calling them to.
So prayer was already central for them.
Mm-hmm.
And into this scene, right after a Sunday service apparently, walks Azim.
A young man, dressed in Muslim clothing, walks right up to Pastor Girani.
Bold move.
And challenges him, right there, about the church's name, Gospel Church for the World. He basically asks Girani why, after 4 years, they're still only focused on the city.
Wow. Talk about direct.
And then Azim makes an even bolder offer. He says, if you will let me, I will take you to my people, the Muslims of the Yappa Plains.
And the notes make a big point here. This was dangerous territory. No other church, no mission group in the whole city or even the country was attempting to go there. It was seen as too risky, too difficult.
So Girani is understandably kind of taken aback. He tells Azim that he and Hadhi will pray about it.
Probably, like the notes suggest, hoping that's the end of the conversation.
Oh.
Like, okay, thanks. We'll think about it.
Exactly. But Azim doesn't let it go. He leans in and quietly asks him, how long will you need to pray? Another 4 years.
Oof. That's pointed. A real challenge.
It really is. But according to the notes, it didn't take 4 years. It took Girani and Hadhi just 1 week.
A week of dedicated prayer and their church praying with them.
And they felt God clearly calling them. It was a huge radical shift away from their city focus, but they said yes.
That's a massive step of faith.
Okay, fast forward a month. They've traveled hundreds of kilometers. They arrive at the designated spot in the Yappa Plains, and waiting for them under a tree are about 50 Yappa Muslim men, armed.
Not exactly a welcoming committee. You can imagine the tension.
Totally. Jirani is clearly hesitant, unsure what to do. He asks Azim for guidance. Azim just says, don't you want to tell them something about Jesus?
Simple enough, but in that context.
Wow. So Jirani starts to speak. But the men are just staring, unmoved. Spears are visible. And in that moment of hesitation, Hadhi steps forward.
Hadhi, yeah.
And she doesn't offer some quiet, gentle prayer. The notes say she prays a loud and bold one, directly rebuking the devil and dark powers in Jesus' name.
Whoa. Okay, that sounds risky. Like really risky in front of 50 armed men who don't know you.
Jirani certainly thought so. His first reaction is panic. He tries to get her to stop, convinced this unadvisable strategy, as the notes call it, is going to get them killed.
You can see why he'd think that. It seems totally counterintuitive from a human perspective.
Absolutely. But Hadhi felt this urgency for that kind of bold prayer. And here's where it gets truly fascinating, according to these writings.
Okay.
Jirani's trying to shush her, right? But then he stops because people in the crowd start weeping.
Weeping?
Yeah. And then some start dropping to their knees. So Jirani suddenly shifts from trying to stop her to urging her, keep praying, keep praying. He realizes this isn't a disaster.
It's a breakthrough.
Exactly. A moment of God's power showing up unexpectedly.
A dramatic, immediate response sparked by her bold, maybe even confrontational prayer.
So what's the situation 5 years after that incredible first meeting? The sources say several of those original 50 men became key Christian leaders in the region.
Still telling the story of that bizarre, powerful first encounter, no doubt.
You bet. And the scale of the outcome reported in the material is just huge.
Yeah.
Over 26,000 former Muslims giving their lives to Jesus.
26,000? That's staggering.
More than 500 simple congregations planted. 7 generations of disciples making disciples.
Incredible multiplication.
And the material is really clear on this point. This wasn't just good strategy or brave people, though they were brave. This massive transformation was catalyzed and sustained by prayer.
Right back to Hadhi.
Yep. Starting small in Jirani and Hadhi's home, growing to involve hundreds of intercessors, lots of fasting, specific prayers for protection, for provision, for miracles. And Hadhi, the prayer lady, the mother of the movement, she's still there, witnessing the regular baptisms that continue.
So the prayer isn't just the starting point. It's the ongoing engine. It's presented as fundamental.
Which brings us to a broader point the notes make. They talk about this global phenomenon, a dramatic revival happening right now. Thousands upon thousands of Muslims becoming followers of Jesus worldwide.
It's something many people are observing. And the natural question is, why? Why now?
Right. And while the ultimate answer is always, God's sovereign timing, the overwhelming human-level explanation that these sources keep coming back to is simply abundant prayer.
Just a sheer volume of focused prayer.
The notes even describe prayer as the greatest weapon a disciple maker possesses, because it shifts the battle, doesn't it? From purely human effort into God's hands.
It's seen as the force that can actually open doors that seem welded shut, tear down those walls of suspicion, of bigotry, break the weapons of hatred aimed at the gospel message.
Yeah, the material explicitly connects this to God's will being done on earth as it is in heaven, referencing Matthew 6.10. Prayer aligns things with God's purposes.
And this leads into the idea of the unseen heroes and heroines mentioned in these writings.
Right, the anonymous, often tenacious prayer warriors, people who just pray relentlessly for things that seem utterly impossible.
Staying up for hours, sometimes all night. These aren't necessarily the big names you hear about, the platform speakers.
No, but according to this material, they are absolutely central to the spiritual progress being made.
And the notes get specific about what they pray for. Raising up bridges for the gospel people you wouldn't expect. Maybe imams, maybe even former persecutors, local leaders, someone who can open a door.
They pray for homes, for mosques, praying directly for people's hearts to be opened.
There's also a really compelling point made about the long view, connecting to the past.
Yeah, the idea that the harvest we're seeing now in the 21st century is actually being borne on the shoulders of Christians who prayed and sacrificed for centuries among Muslim communities, often without seeing much fruit in their own lifetimes.
Like planting and watering, as Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. Generations praying before the harvest really comes in.
Exactly. Referencing Matthew 9 about the harvest being plentiful but the laborers few, it all underscores prayer's foundational role. It's the starting point and sustainer.
And that phrase from the material really sticks. Prayer is the absolute prerequisite. It requires praying until the impossible starts to happen. Not just praying about it, but praying it through.
Okay, so if much prayer is presented as the key, what does that actually look like, on the ground? Based on what these writings describe, what are the common patterns?
Well, several characteristics pop up repeatedly in the notes. First, just the simple fact of having many Christians consistently praying specifically for Muslim people and communities. It's a widespread focus.
Not just a niche thing?
No. Also, it seems common for new believers from Muslim backgrounds to adopt a practice of gently fasting, often giving up at least 2 meals in a day for prayer.
Okay. And the notes mention dedicated long prayer times too, right?
Yeah, like regular all-night prayer vigils or maybe 6-hour blocks. And often they're praying very specifically, even naming individuals they're interceding for.
Midday prayer times for ministry teams or whole churches also seem to be a regular feature.
Built into the rhythm of the week.
And personal prayer.
Widespread personal early morning prayer. The notes say spending 1 to 3 hours in personal prayer before the day starts isn't considered uncommon for many involved in these movements.
Wow, that's significant dedication.
It is. Family devotions to Bible reading and praying together as a family. And really importantly, new believers are intentionally discipled in how to pray.
Not just told to pray.
Exactly. They learn to pour out their hearts to God. And the notes highlight how transformative this is, especially for those coming from backgrounds with very rigid, maybe rote prayer structures.
Right. They discover prayer as this: welcome, freeing conversation with a loving Father.
It's described as a joyous revelation for them, a huge contrast to maybe just reciting memorized prayers from their past. And a big part of how they learn this is simply by seeing their mentors do it, praying with them.
So it's caught more than taught, learned by experience and observation.
Very much so. Less about seminars on prayer, more about shared life and practice.
Okay, so pulling from all this, the material seems to boil it down to 4 key strategic elements for prayer in these kinds of ministries. The first one is leaders modeling prayer.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
The leaders themselves have to live it. They model disciplined personal prayer lives. The notes give this example of a leader, himself from a Muslim background, who was key in starting over 300 churches.
Okay.
He apparently prays for hours every single day. He prays with his family. He prays regularly with his ministry partners. He even describes his state as his heart being always in prayer, like a constant connection.
So it's not just a scheduled activity, it's a way of being.
Exactly. And that modeling leaders praying with people openly, consistently, is seen as fundamental for raising up the next generation of prayer mobilizers. You show the way, you don't just talk about it.
Gotcha. Okay, element number 2. Praying for new regions and pioneer teams.
Right. And the key here is that this intense prayer effort happens before teams even set foot in these challenging new Muslim regions. They sometimes call these initial teams pioneer teams.
So prayer leads the way.
Definitely. Dedicated prayer teams are formed just for these specific new areas. They meet regularly, sometimes several times a week, specifically for focused fasting and prayer for that region.
And what are they praying for specifically?
Very targeted things. Praying for key leaders in that community, often by name if they know them. Praying about local issues of spiritual bondage or prevalent sin patterns. Praying for God to reveal persons of peace.
That's receptive individuals.
Exactly. People God is prepared to welcome the message and the messengers, and also praying specifically to bind or counter negative spiritual influences, demonic strongholds.
So quite proactive spiritual warfare type prayer.
Yes. Some groups even practice fasting during daylight hours for a whole month before a pioneer team enters a new area.
Right.
Overnight prayer meetings are just seen as a normal part of the preparation strategy.
The notes also mention something called spiritual scanning and intercession. What's that about?
It's this process of intentionally trying to understand the deeper realities of a place, not just the surface stuff.
Okay.
It involves practical research, learning the community's history, its current issues, influential groups, traditions, felt needs. But it combines that with prayer walking.
Physically walking the streets and praying.
Yeah. Walking through the neighborhoods, asking God for discernment about spiritual strongholds, dominant sins, maybe old covenants or historical events that are still having a negative spiritual impact.
Interesting.
The material gives a case example where they use this kind of scanning to identify the lingering negative influence of a powerful witch doctor from the past in a particular area.
And then they prayed specifically against that legacy.
Exactly. Using the specific information gleaned from the scanning to inform targeted prayer, asking God to break that spiritual bondage before the team even started trying to share the gospel message there, kind of clearing the spiritual ground first.
That makes sense. Using intel for targeted prayer.
Precisely.
Ah,
And this idea is illustrated really powerfully in a story the notes call a case study in persevering prayer.
oh yeah, I remember this one. The village story. A church planter sends two guys into a village.
And they get completely rejected. The chief says no, the villagers want nothing to do with them or their message. Shut down.
So the planter doesn't just say, oh well, wrong village.
Nope. He goes back to his intercessory prayer team, and he tells them, pray specifically for that village for 2 days straight. Focused, intense prayer.
Okay.
After 2 days of that targeted prayer, he sends the 2 men back. But this time he adds a third person, so 3 of them go.
They arrive back at the village, and the chief's answer is, still no, still can't come in.
But there's a complication. The chief's son is very sick. The notes, it was something like polio. He couldn't walk properly. So the team asks, can we just pray for your son? The chief is desperate, so he agrees. But he tells them pray and that you leave immediately.
Right, and here's the pivot point in the story.
This is where it gets incredible.
Yeah.
They pray for the child, and according to the notes, he is instantly and completely healed. Starts walking, running, no more limp.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. The chief is absolutely astonished. He apparently exclaims, you people, you are magicians.
And their reply,
Simple and direct. No, this is Jesus.
powerful.
Totally. And the chief, just overwhelmed by this, his resistance completely melts. He welcomes them fully. Says, as from today, this is your home. Take the town.
And the notes stress it wasn't just, okay, you can build a church building here.
No, it was full access. Welcome to make disciples, plant a church, live among them. A complete breakthrough. And the source clearly links it to that persistent, targeted prayer and the resulting miracle.
That story really underscores the point. Okay, the third strategic element mentioned is training new Christians to pray.
Yeah, and this connects back to what we touched on earlier. It's not primarily about classroom teaching or seminars.
Right, it's about modeling and doing.
Exactly. Mentors spend significant time praying with new believers, showing them how, by doing it together.
And again, the notes really emphasize the joy and the freedom that this brings, especially for former Muslims, learning that prayer is a conversation with a loving Father.
Not just rigid formulas or formal postures, feeling welcome to just speak their hearts, ask for help, express gratitude. It's presented as a liberating discovery.
Hadhi is mentioned again here too, isn't she?
Yes, as a prime example, modeling prayer so simply and naturally, just asking God for what's needed right there, whether with a believer or someone who isn't yet. And seeing this simple, relational prayer lead to freedom and conversions, it demystifies it.
Makes it accessible and relational, not intimidating.
Precisely.
Okay, and the fourth element, developing intercessory prayer in every church.
This is about making much prayer, as the notes phrase it, just the normal way of life for the church community.
Not just for a select few prayer warriors.
Right? It becomes part of the church's DNA. It mentions countless home churches holding regular, often weekly, overnight, or half-night prayer meetings, maybe going from, say, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. together in prayer.
That's a serious commitment for a whole church group.
It is. And the scope of their prayer is huge. Praying for the world, their nation, their local community, their own church fellowship, specific ministries they're involved in, individuals by name, and engaging in spiritual warfare prayer.
Covering all the bases.
Yeah. And it even mentions specific shared prayer times, just for church planners to come together, share their struggles and visions, and pray through their plans and challenges together. It's deeply integrated.
So prayer isn't just an activity, it's woven into the very fabric of church life and ministry strategy.
That's the picture the sources paint.
Okay, the sources kind of cap all this off with another really remarkable story. This one focuses on Jacob, the person quoted right at the beginning.
Ah, yes, Jacob's story. He felt called to ministry in a strongly Muslim area in Africa. Had this huge vision, but very few resources.
So what did he rely on?
Prayer. That was his primary resource. He moved his young family there into this town, and soon after arriving, late at night, he starts hearing these horrific screams coming from a nearby forest.
Oh, wow. That sounds terrifying.
It does. He recognized it pretty quickly as some kind of a cultic initiation rite belonging to a local group called the Mbakama order. Very dark stuff.
So what does he do? Does he try to confront them?
No, his response wasn't direct physical confrontation.
Yeah.
He chose a different strategy. Intense, focused prayer.
Okay.
For an entire month, every single night from midnight until sunrise, Jacob prayed alone. The notes say he focused on acknowledging God's supreme power, asking God to demonstrate that power visibly in that place, and specifically inviting God to break the power of that demonic activity happening in the forest.
A whole month of all-night prayer. That's intense.
Extremely. And the notes describe a direct result. Initiates started running out of the forest injured. Things went wrong during the rites. The whole cultic activity became a kind of public scandal. It couldn't continue operating secretly or effectively anymore.
So his prayers directly disrupted their activities.
That's how the source presents it. And this disruption led the witch doctors associated with the order to consult their spiritual forces, or whatever they did. They identified Jacob. The message came back. He has a different spirit. He is opposing us.
Uh-oh. That sounds like trouble.
It led to a direct confrontation. The leaders of the order, along with about 100 of their followers, came to Jacob's house, threatened him, and started stoning his house.
100 people. What did Jacob do?
His instruction to his family, who were inside with him, simply trust God for protection. Don't retaliate, don't panic, trust God.
That takes immense faith.
Absolutely. And then the notes recount this specific incident. The leaders apparently recruited some men to specifically terrorize Jacob's property, maybe dismantle things. One man climbed up onto a simple animal shelter Jacob had, intending to steal the metal roofing sheets.
Okay.
And the moment he got up there, the notes say instantly, the roof just collapsed beneath him. He fell, got hurt, and he and all the others fled in a complete panic.
Wow. Divine intervention.
The material definitely attributes it to God's direct defense in response to Jacob's reliance on him through prayer. And the long-term outcome of all this.
What happened to the order?
The Mbakama order completely left the area. They moved away. The notes say the place became peaceful, describing it like a garden. And this whole experience, this victory, profoundly deepened Jacob's own faith.
I can imagine. And the story continues, right? About a garden place.
Yes. So one morning, Jacob is praying in this now peaceful area, the former center of that dark activity. And he has this strong sense that God is actually offering him that specific piece of land.
The land where the rites used to happen.
Exactly. And Jacob's immediate response, full of faith after what he'd seen God do, was apparently, my God, if you are offering it, then I need it. I believe you. Just accepted it in faith right there.
Okay. But how would he actually get the land?
And here's where the story takes another extraordinary turn, connecting prayer and completely unexpected provision. That very same Sunday morning,
The same day.
a young man named Jamal, who happened to be the son of a prominent local Muslim businessman, felt this sudden, inexplicable urge to go to a church service. First time ever in his life he'd set foot in a church.
Wow. Okay.
He shows up, sits down in Jacob's small, humble church gathering, and sometime during that service, Jacob stands up. And he just asks the congregation, does anyone here know who owns that garden place? The place he'd just been praying about that morning.
And Jamal is sitting right there?
Jamal, the first-time visitor, is sitting right there. And he immediately knows exactly which piece of land Jacob is talking about.
No way.
Yes. He speaks up and identifies it. Says it belonged to his late father, who had actually intended to build a mosque there, but it had just sat empty since his father died.
So Jamal connects the dots. Being there that day, hearing that specific announcement.
He instantly makes the connection.
Yeah.
He sees God orchestrating this, speaking directly to him through this incredible coincidence.
And what was the outcome?
The outcome was that Jamal decided, right then and there, to become a follower of Jesus. And he offered to give the land, that garden place, to Jacob and his ministry for free.
Unbelievable. From a cultic center to ministry center.
Exactly. The notes conclude Jacob's story by highlighting the ultimate fruit. Jamal became a key disciple. That piece of land became a vital ministry center, a place that eventually trained thousands of intercessors and hundreds of missionaries.
Which in turn led to the planting of over 1,000 new churches among Muslim people groups in the region.
All of that massive multiplying impact, traced right back by the source to Jacob's single month of persistent, faithful, all-night prayer in the face of intense opposition.
And the notes point out how God's response went so far beyond what Jacob asked or imagined. He prayed for the demonic power to be broken. God gave him the land and launched a movement from it.
It's such a powerful illustration of the principles woven through all these accounts.
Absolutely. So if we try to distill the central idea we've pulled from these materials today, It seems to be that prayer, when it's modeled authentically and practiced with real tenacity, often involving sacrifice, it's presented as the driving force, the engine behind these remarkable spiritual movements and breakthroughs, especially in really difficult places.
Yeah, the stories are vivid, aren't they? Hadhi's unseen intercession seemingly fueling that huge baptism. The specific prayer and healing opening up a hostile village. Jacob's month-long prayer vigil completely transforming a dangerous area and leading, amazingly, to both a key resource and a key new disciple.
These aren't just presented as, interesting anecdotes. According to these notes, they're shown as direct evidence of the power unleashed through this specific kind of dedicated prayer practice.
The strong suggestion from these materials is that the kind of transformative impact described, it doesn't just happen by chance or only through human effort. It seems deeply fundamentally connected to believing God can do the impossible and then engaging in that persistent, often strategic prayer until that impossibility starts to shift.
Which really leaves us with a thought to maybe sit with. For you listening, thinking about your own context, your own community or situation. What seemingly impossible situation might just be waiting for that kind of persistent, strategic, faith-filled prayer that we've heard about in these sources today?